Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Bubble's inaugural live stream launch to celebrate the wide release of our new responsive editor. My name is Vivian. You have probably received an email from me at some point in your Bubble journey, but I am very excited to be introducing you to some of the faces behind the features of Bubble. Bubble is such a powerful and robust no-code web app builder. If you're looking to build a tech product as a startup or an online business that requires more than a landing page, I think Bubble is truly one of the best platforms that you can do it on. And with the launch of New Responsive, I personally feel like Bubble is really coming into a new era of accessibility around designing modern web apps. So today you'll be hearing a little start from one of our founders and co-CEO, Emmanuel, and then we're going to be meeting some of the incredibly hardworking people who contributed to the responsive launch, where you'll also be seeing something exciting, an interactive game template that we built, originally built internally by our team to teach each other the responsive game. But now we're spinning out to you so you can basically play along with us. And afterward, I'll be moderating a fireside chat with everyone, talking about our favorite features and sharing some of the behind-the-scenes decision-making and planning that went into creating this new responsive editor. As a reminder, if you want to leave a comment or a question in the chat of wherever you're watching, whether it's YouTube or LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitch, we'll be showcasing some of your questions and comments on screen as we go. And there'll be time for an audience Q&A. So if you want your questions selected for answering, drop them in the chat at any point, and I'll be passing along some of them to our team at the end. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Emmanuel Strashnov, founder and co-CEO of Bubble, to say a few words of welcome.
Thank you, Vivian. This is pretty special for me to do this because this is the first time we actually make such a live stream for a new feature. And I hope we'll keep doing this. This is an experiment, but I think it's a great way to connect with our community of users and exchange with users as we release something in a more dynamic way than what we've done to date. So what I wanted to say tonight was a few words around responsive, actually, because that's really what this live stream is about, and give a little bit of background and history on how we got where we are today. So Josh and I started Bubble 10 years ago now, so in 2012, so pretty long time ago. And so because of this, well, first of all, we did not start thinking about responsive in the very first years of the product, but starting 2013, 2014, started thinking, okay, we need to find a way to let people build responsive web apps because mobile devices are getting more and more popular. And so we started thinking about ways to do this. And it was not easy. It was not an easy project because since the beginning, we've always tried to really empower people to put elements exactly where they wanted on the page. And at the same time, we wanted this to look great on any device. And if you look at a lot of tools around, there is usually some conflict here between how much freedom you give and how great it looks as people build things, in particular on different devices. And so 3 years in 2015, we started really tackling this issue, thinking, okay, like this is not okay not to be responsive as a web app builder. So we need to build our own system to empower our users to build whatever they want and something that looks great on any screen width. And if people remember, 2015 was actually at the time where Flexbox started being a thing, but it was not as as a standard as it is today. And so effectively what we did is we kind of recreated our own implementation of Flexbox, but using our own technologies, which got the job done in some ways. Like people were able to build responsive pages on Bubble since 2015, but it certainly became kind of a liability for us as Flexbox became like a bigger standard because people had to learn how to use our own standard, which was similar in some ways, but definitely not the same as what you would have with Flexbox. And so we kept going for quite a few years until earlier last year when we started thinking, okay, now we need to find a way that is going to be in line with the standards of the market. Clearly, there is a way now to think about responsive pages in a pretty standardized way. And so let's figure out a way to keep what makes Bubble unique, which is really, you can put things wherever you need. You can have elements on top of each other because, if you build a web app and not just a landing page, you're going to have to do these things. But at the same time, create something that, is easy to understand for people with some design experience, and something that is just, more efficient and performance as, we render pages on in the browser. And so that leads us to today. I mean, this has been a very long project, truth being told. We started thinking actively about this early last year because we wanted to get it right. And I really want to, pay tribute to our team here. When I look at what the team has achieved today compared to, what Josh and I achieved 2015, that's why, we build a team, because you get people that can do a better job than what you can do yourself. And I'm extremely impressed with what the team has achieved, because the feedback we've got from the community has been extraordinary, in the sense of, how much empowering the new system is, and at the same time, how fast it is to build on. And then there is the obvious performance win, which is, if you start using the Flexbox framework, things will work better, because this is the way, modern pages are being built. So I won't take much longer here. Just want to say, I hope you enjoy this live stream, because this is our first, and we hope to do more of this. I hope you enjoy building pages on the new responsive engine as much as many users have to date during our beta period. And then I want to congratulate the team, because this is a big day for them. They're getting their project out, and they've done like a fantastic job here. So enjoy this, and I hope to talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Manuel. And thank you, everyone, for joining me. I'd like to introduce you, or I'll have them introduce themselves, the team that really worked on the core of the responsive project. And I think, I just want to say to start that, everyone at the Bubble team always contributes to the projects almost in a really collective manner. So the people you're seeing today represent just a fraction of the entire team's work on this project, from our success team, building out, documentation, and everybody, all along in Bubble's organization. But I just wanted to really highlight them here. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves, starting with Nick. If you want to introduce yourself and your role at Bubble, and we'll go down the line.
Awesome. Thanks, Vivian. And thanks everyone for tuning in. This is very cool to be a part of. I'm Nick. Great to see you, some of you. I think I've seen some familiar names in the chat here, and definitely great to meet all the new folks. I'm a product manager here at Bubble, and I was the PM on this project. I kind of saw my role as helping bring the team's vision to life, and then making sure that the implementation of it is what actually helps you guys, right? Is what provides value. So, really thrilled to be a part of this project and here today, and I'll pass it off to Bobby.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bobby. I manage product design here at Bubble, and I was the product designer on Responsive. I'll pass that off to Cal.
Hi, I'm Cal. I was the original engineer on the project, almost like the architect of the project. And I was the sole engineer working on it for a while until the project was nearing the completion of beta, where we brought on Kathleen and Monsi. So I'll pass it along to them. Kathleen.
Yeah, hi. I'm Kathleen. I'm also a software engineer at Bubble. I joined the responsive team maybe a month before the beta launch, and then after the launch, I worked on features such as gap controls and then drag and drop in the elements tree. So thanks for coming, everyone. Very excited. Monsi?
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm also an engineer on the team that built the new responsive engine, and I joined along with Kathleen about a month before the launch into beta, and since then have been working on releasing a bunch of the features that you've been seeing and using within the engine.
Well, thank you, everyone, for introducing themselves. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to lead into Nick basically demoing a fun interactive game that we actually built in Bubble, or Jeremy, our education lead, built in Bubble to showcase basically the basics of the new responsive controls. So if you're new to Bubble, or if you've been building in the old responsive engine, you'll recognize that there's a lot of big changes. I think that the new responsive editor really represents a fundamental shift in how people build. And so it took us a while on the team to even like learn and conceptualize how we were going to do this. And so we had someone on the team teach us how to build appropriately. So Nick, if you want to showcase this, I'm going to hand it off to you to share what we call the bird game.
Awesome. Yeah, would love to. I'm going to share my screen here.
Give us the
question everyone's asking these days. Can you see my screen? Okay, cool. I think we can see it. Yeah, so Vivian teased this earlier. This game, the bird game, was built internally by Jeremy. As actually, I think he approached me one day. It was just like, hey, I put together this awesome game. It has these different lessons that allow you to kind of learn the new controls. And then he kept just improving it, and showing it to everyone in the company. And then we're like, wait, we should like expose this to our users, right? Everyone in the company is feeling really loves this game and finding it as a really fun way to learn all the new controls. So we're really excited to be able to give this all to you now. So I'll kind of jump into how to use it, how to get it, how to use it, and then tease a few of the lessons that kind of walk you through the new controls. So this is actually a template. And so this is a template that you can download that you'll create an app from. And one cool thing about this game is that it's not a run mode game, right? These are actually lessons within the editor where you're interacting directly with the property editor. So this should feel very comfortable to all you builders out there. We're working within a template. This is a page, just like any other page. But since it's a template, it has all this pre-built content. We have some nice instructions here on how to get started, but I'll work through that. So the idea of the game is to move this bird or different characters as we go through this journey to their home in the window here. And so this is done just by manipulating a few controls in the property editor. And again, the key here is to start to introduce everyone to the basic level controls so that you're familiar with the principles of new responsive. So I'll show a few lessons here. So right here, we have the bird and we want to get the bird to its home. So this is a row container. So I'll start playing around and see how I might get this bird over to this window. By clicking right align here, I've been able to move the bird over. Let's check out the next one. Okay, our friend is away from the window, so let's get this bird back. I can left align and bring the bird over. And so we kind of go through lesson by lesson, and it gets a little trickier as you go. But if we want to bring these two birds over to the center, the center line. And so right here, this is meant to teach that in a row container, you have container alignment controls that allow you to control overall the behavior of the child elements. So not how any of them act individually, but how they act kind of all together in the container, right? Right align, middle align, left align. So highly recommend checking out this template, downloading it, creating an app from it. There are 39 levels. Which is pretty awesome, and I think we'll definitely be adding more based on feedback that comes through. But that is the bird game.
A couple of other things I would add is that if you need, Jeremy created this really greatly. If you need hints or the solution, we have notes, so you can go into the notes icon and discover what the hint is for any of the given puzzles. And I think this is where some people may discover that Bubble has notes because it's one of those things that I've always taken a while to learn. I was like, whoa, we have a notes feature. So yes, in each of these elements, it contains the hint and then also the solution. So if you're stuck, you can always take the hint. Definitely encourage everyone. So it's a template, so you can actually download it, create your own app for free, play around with it yourself so you can practice in the editor. This is sort of like our first iteration, again, of internal testing that became a game. And shout out to Jeremy again for building this. It's really great, and it takes you through all the different containers, including row, column, line parent, which Nick will talk about a little bit more in his demo.
Yeah. So to follow up on this, what's great about this game is that it helps you learn the specific controls. In this layout tab, for those that are familiar, we've introduced a lot of new responsive controls that give you kind of that power and that expressivity. So wanted to show what happens when you start combining those. I think the real magic is when you start to combine all of these individual controls to create behavior that you want. So I'm going to switch over to a demo over here of building a simple form, right? Forgive me, I am not a designer. I leave that to Bobby, but took a stab at putting together a simple form here. So let's say this is a sign up form. We want to collect the user's first name, their last name, their email, and then the ability to sign up. But I also want this form to be responsive. So, I want this form to react when I have a smaller screen. So, I'm viewing it on my desktop right now, but what happens if I'm looking at it on a tablet? Well, I can click the tablet and we start to see that, the form is reacting to the screen size. It is responsive. But what if I'm, landscape on my mobile device? Well, I can use this shortcut right here to see what that would look like. And, right there we see, okay, well, stuff starts to change. And then even if I go down to a mobile, my form scales gracefully. One, the ability of the responsive tab to kind of allow you to play around, but also wanted to highlight what happens when you start to combine some of these concepts. So for example, if we dive into the page, we see the page is set to an align to parent. I just wanted to center my form in the middle of the page. And this gives me a really easy way of doing that using the non-int controls, right? I want to pin it to the center here. The next thing is starting to lay out the individual items. So for instance, I want to have a label and I have that above my input form. And so if I go into this group, I'm going to expand the elements tree here so you can see. If I go into group first name, we see that it's actually a column. So that allows me to organize this text box and this input here vertically. And that means no matter how it moves along the page, these two are always going to be together, even when things stretch, right, or shrink, they're going to stay together. Similarly, with my last name input, I want to have that label and I want to have my input next to the input. Cool thing happens here is when I combine these two column groups right here, so group first name, group last name, and I put them in a row. So the row allows me to have that wrapping effect, right? So things will kind of stretch out to fit on a single row, and then when it gets too small, then it'll move over to the bottom. And so we can see that in action by shrinking the screen. So once we reach a certain point, we see that it actually it wraps underneath. But because I've kept first name in its own group, that's a column, and then last name in a group, that's a column, these things still stay together, even though overall they're wrapping to a new row. Another cool little thing that allows you to build forms really fast is the row space between. So the row space between setting is really cool. I use it all the time. Basically allows me to add as much content as I want to a row group and then have it just stretch out, right? Put as much space in between these two things as we possibly can. And we see that no matter what screen width, these things always stay far apart, as opposed to center aligning, right? Where they'll always stay in the center. So yeah, that is a quick demo of what you can do when you start to combine these base principles that you'll learn in the Bird game and put it towards something like a form or an entire web app.
Thank you, Nick. Really appreciate all the demos that are happening. It's really great to see just like how far it's come from what Bubble used to be to what Bubble is today. And I think that once again, for everybody who's just joining us, if you want to try out new responsive starting since Monday. It has been the basically the default experience for creating a new app. So if you are a current user and you want to try this out, you just need to create a new app. If you're new, your default experience will be the new responsive. If you have existing apps, you can choose to convert each individual page into the new responsive and play around with that and work on your own time to build the new responsive pages. So we're giving people some time to learn, some time to try things out. And now I kind of want to turn it over to the team to sort of ask a couple questions. And again, if you are joining us and you want to include your own questions, feel free to drop them in chat. We will be highlighting some towards the end of this. But I wanted to start with Nick, since you were leading in this. I'm curious to ask you, what do you feel like are the main benefits of Bubbles' new responsive editor? Like if you had to sum it up to someone who's never tried this before.
Yeah, that is a great question. I would say probably the biggest thing with the new responsive editor is just the speed at which you can build very complex layouts. It gives you the control to be so precise with where you want things, yet do those things in any number of ways based on very simple settings that we lay out. So I think the speed to build has been one of the things that stood out. I build a lot of Bubble apps on the side, and it is amazing how much faster it was for me to build just, again, simple stuff or complex stuff. So yeah, that's been the piece that I appreciate the most.
Well, thank you, Nick. One of the things I actually want to bring up is for Kathleen and Monsi to demo some of the cool features that are part of the new responsive experience. So I'm going to start with Kathleen. If you would like to demo what you helped build in the new responsive engine, I'd be great, and take it away.
Sure. So hi, if you just joined, my name is Kathleen, and I'll be demoing drag and drop in the elements tree, which basically allows you to drag various elements in the elements tree and then have that reflect on the editor canvas. So before, the elements tree pretty much just displayed the elements on the page, but in new responsive, it was really cool to make it more powerful and to provide more functionality so that building becomes easier. So let me share my screen. All right. Cool. So here, as you can see, we have two groups. The first is a column, and then the second is aligned to parent. So as you can see here, the button is snapped to the top left corner. And then I have button B on the outside of those two groups. And so let's say in the elements tree, I want to drag this button. I click and hold, and you can see I can drag like above, between. Let's say I want to drag above. And so as you can see, that change is reflected on the editor canvas. And so if I hover over a group, it will expand. So I have more control over where I drop this button. And then if I drop it into a collapsed group, the element will be default, the last element in the list. So as you can see here, button B. You can also reorder elements within their container. So for rows and columns, elements are sorted according to ascending order. And then for fixed and aligned to parent containers, elements are sorted by ascending z-index. So if you say like reorder elements within their container, their z-indices or order will change accordingly. So as you can see here, button C is on top of button B. That's because button C has a higher z-index than button B. So these are decisions that we made so that all elements behave consistently. One other thing to note is that we disabled drag and drop for certain elements, such as like pop-ups. Those live above the page. So yeah, that's about it. Let me stop sharing.
Thank you, Kathleen. That was really awesome. I love, like, I mean, it feels like one of those things that is somewhat intuitive. That's finally part of the Bubble experience, which is to have the drag and drop in the editors. And I really love hearing the kind of logic of how people on the team decided like how things were going to be spaced. Because it's one of those things that you think of like when something happens, like you don't actually realize how much thought goes into creating these features. So now I'm going to have Monsi come up to share something else, also drag and drop related, that we built as part of the new features that came out as a response to everything that we heard in the beta. So Monsi, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Vivian. And yeah, that was a super cool demo, Kathleen. Before I dive in, just for a bit of background, one of the things that I love most about working at Bubble and specifically on this team is that we put users first in whatever it is that we're building. And specifically for this beta launch, we've been blessed with a super active community, and they've provided so much feedback, comments, and support since we've launched the beta. And every feature that we've built since then has been in direct response to those comments and feedback. So yeah, as much as this was the team that was building out the features and product that you see, it wouldn't have been possible at all without like the support of the entire community. So right now I'm going to be showcasing some of the features that I think are especially game-changing by building a simple header. And this will be using padding, column gap, and conditional statements with transitions. So let me share my screen. All right, so for the sake of time, I'll focus just on the visual design of these rather than the actual functionality. And I've also already set up a couple of the elements. So here is a group that's set to be aligned to parent. This is an icon, and these are some links that we might want to also add to the nav bar. All right, so let's say that we want to have this icon be on the left side of the nav bar and these links to be on the right side. One piece of feedback that we received from the community was that it's really helpful to be able to drag and drop elements directly into the specific location of a container that you want it to go. Whereas previously you would have to change properties within the property editor to place an element. Now you can just drag and drop, and I built out a system where you can also see an indicator of where your element will fall. So let's add the icon to the left-hand side and the links to the right-hand side. And you'll see that the nav bar already looks a little bit better, but there's some polish that can be added where we want to add some more spacing between these elements. So one way to do this would be to just go into each element and add margins to every single one of them. But again, we heard from users that this can get redundant and frustrating. So one of the features that I built was padding, where on containers, you can add padding to a container. So let's add a right padding of 50, a left padding of 50 pixels as well. And you'll see that everything moves in and all children are affected by that. And then here, if we want these links to be spaced apart, again, we could go in and add margins to every single element, or we can use a feature that Kathleen actually built to add gap spacing, where we can add a column gap of 20 pixels where anything in this row container will be spaced out by 20 pixels. So for example, if we realize that in our nav bar, we also want to now have a link to an about page, we can just copy paste the previous link, change this to about, and the spacing will be applied automatically. If we go into the responsive tab, we can see that the spacing remains as you would expect as you change the sizing, but in smaller screen sizes, it might get kind of crowded. So in order to change that, there's a feature that we can use called conditionals, which have existed for a while, but particularly for padding, I added the capability to use conditionals where, for example, if we want to decrease the amount of padding when the group's width is less than 550 pixels, we can set it to be 20 instead of 50. And then when we decrease past that amount, it'll transition into the smaller padding, but it still feels a little bit jumpy. So we can go into groups, and we've also implemented transitions where if we add in a left padding transition and right padding transition and preview that, you'll see that on smaller screen sizes, it transitions a lot more fluidly. So also, I realize I do need to update my Chrome, but this is a nice little showcase of a couple of the features that we've been able to build out for the new responsive engine. And yeah, it kind of just shows how everything that we've built for this has come out of a true need from our users. And yeah, I can't wait for everything that this unlocks in the future. I'll pass it back to Vivian.
Thank you, Monse. Next, I want to ask, Bobby and Nick, or Bobby and Cal, who worked on pretty much the early stage iterations of both the design and the development. I'll start with Cal. I would love to ask you, like, how did you guys think about the, process of developing the new responsive experience to start?
Yeah, thanks, Vivian. Yeah, I mean, really, the process kind of started almost at the end of 2020, where Josh kind of came to me and he asked me to basically overhaul the responsive engine. Like that was the pitch that he gave me, and kind of no real direction there. Kind of I had to go and figure out like what did we even want a responsive engine to be, right? Like I knew some of the problems with our old responsive engine and some of the feedback that we've gotten over the years through various different users. And so I knew a lot of the pain points for both new users and power users, but I didn't really know where we wanted to end up. Like obviously I could look at other website builders and take some of inspiration from them, but really I wanted a solution that worked for what Bubble was trying to achieve. And so I started out with a kind of initial prototype of kind of a really radical departure. And I shared it around, this was in like December of 2020, I shared it around with some of our power users. The way this prototype worked was it was a drag and drop canvas that like had other elements move around as you dragged elements around and allowed you to design responsibly from the get-go. But a lot of users gave feedback that it was a little bit too complicated and maybe a little bit too confusing. And so I went back to the drawing board. And then over the course of the beginning of 2021, I kind of had this almost complete opposite approach where I just took our existing responsive engine and just upgraded the underlying technology to use Flexbox and maybe add some new features along the way, but really keeping the core of the engine the same. And again, I shared the prototype around, or I shared an implementation of that around with, again, some of our users that we're in contact with. And in this sense, the feedback was almost the opposite direction. Like people wanted more change. It was still had a lot of the problems that existed in the old engine. And so finally, me and Bobby were sitting in a call one day, and we kind of came up with this idea on the spot with these different container types, and basically having the philosophy of what if we allow the users to express almost entirely how they want their app to respond. Like one of the big philosophies with the old engine was did a lot of guesswork. So you'd lay things out with like XY positions, and we'd guess the responsive behavior based on that. But really, there's just core limitations with that we couldn't overcome. And so we instead went for an approach where we gave the users all the tools they need, these very different container types that we prototyped out. So the row, the column, and the alliance parent. We give them those three tools, and then we just allow them to use them however they want. And then you can create any layout with that. And basically, from that approach, we worked on it. I worked on some prototypes, and then that kind of turned into the new responsive engine. And then by October, we had Kathleen and Monse on, and then I had built an actual team around this project. But yeah, that was kind of the approach of how we got to this current iteration of it, where it's a very different engine than our previous engine, but it allows for a lot more power and a lot more expressivity.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Bobby, could you sort of describe the process of designing with Cal this new responsive editor and the engine around it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us, everyone. So when we started looking at the new responsive engine, one of the things that we were kind of looking at is what is difficult about responsive and what's difficult about understanding what's going to happen to your given layouts. As Cal stated, we were kind of looking at how to control elements and pseudo elements within them. And that was kind of one of the complexities with the controls that we're providing to our users, because users are used to seeing an element, controlling that within the property editor, but not understanding what else would actually happen within that. So how does that relate to another element? As we started working on this, we started thinking about what's a way to actually get users to opt into the complexity of responsive rather than putting that burden on them as a start. So we began by looking at what would it be like to actually provide users with a fixed layout. And by fixed layout, I mean we provide a fixed canvas for that user. So anything they lay out would be exactly as they intended. So when they preview, it would be at those same exact dimensions. Then when a user actually opts into responsive, they'd be able to select either that row or that column layout, which we would see from Flexbox. When we saw that, we actually identified that there might be another opportunity for another layout type that would allow users to pin things to different places. We started by calling that relative, and then we kept on trying to find the right nomenclature there, and we ended up aligning to parent. That way you can see a child element align within a parent container. When we actually started this project, like the core goals were, how do we start providing some of these controls without making Bubble too complicated? And that was one of the first core problems that we kind of saw. And luckily we were able to collaborate with Emmanuel and work on this notion of a layout tab. And that would be the way that we could indicate to users that they were on new responsive and give them that difference between old responsive and new responsive. When we started this, we also wanted to figure out what would be like the ideal vision for this project or for this entire feature set. So we went through myself, Cal, and Nick and listed out everything that we would want to come out of this whole responsive feature set. And then we said, okay, what would be the minimum feature set that we could offer to our users to provide them some value? We fleshed out what those pieces were, and then we sat down with our head of product to flesh out what kind of layouts we could build and how. So we actually went through and tested each other to see how we build different layouts we could find around the web. And once we fleshed out that that was something that was intuitive for all of us without actually designing any interfaces, we got into actually building the responsive engine and designing the first set. And it's been really fortunate that our team has provided a ton of great feedback, and our community has been really driven on providing more feedback on different feature sets. And based off of what they've told us, we've been able to actually prioritize different features. And everything that you're seeing is actually coming out because of everything that we're hearing from the community. It's kind of where we're at today.
Well, thank you, Bobby, for explaining that. What I'm hearing a lot is definitely, as the community should know, your feedback is really, truly a huge part of what makes Bubble make its decisions. I think that there is a really amazing feedback loop when it comes to users, offering content, comments, testing for all these apps. If you're part of the alpha, if you're part of the beta, I think that your feedback is really what's driving a lot of this. So my next question, I have two more questions before we turn it over to audience questions. One is for Nick, in terms of if you can give, the Bubble community a sense of the logic behind how we build features in general, and how do we prioritize the scope of a project like New Responsive?
Yeah, that is a great question. Thanks, Vivian. This was a really cool project, not because of what we ended up delivering, but how we approached it. And I think Bobby and Cal did a great job kind of laying out the cards on how we approached it. This was also a project that formed a team, right? Like the five of us here weren't working together until this responsive project was born. And so we were able to kind of start from scratch with everything. And so one thing to call out was we started with what is the vision, right? What are the core principles? And then we battle tested that, right? Internally with the co-founders who, again, have been building this thing for 10 years and got their seal of approval. We put it in front of users and tweaked and tweaked and tweaked until we got something that we all felt really good about. But again, we had a laundry list of things that we wanted to build, but this was a giant leap, right? We're completely rebuilding the way that users build on Bubble. So we kind of settled on that core, right? That core decision of let's expose the principles and see what happens after that. And when we brought it out, right, the feedback starts pouring in. It validated that we were on the right track, but we were missing some really important things. Like gap controls was not on our radar until one of our power users, shout out Faye, I don't know if you're on this live stream, but was like, guys, what would make this even better is if we had gap controls. We started looking into it. It's like, well, again, since we had formulated this whole project based on some core principles, it wasn't actually that bad to implement. The team turned that around in 2 weeks. And what we found was because we were all aligned from the start and we were getting this great user feedback, we were able to pump out new features almost every 2 weeks. And I think that model, right, it's what we all wanted to be. And because we were able to start fresh with this new project, we were able to really achieve that ideal product development cycle. And it's really cool that this has, we've taken this kind of concept, which is not really foreign to product development. Like, this is kind of where teams want to be, and we've been able to apply that across the company and across all new projects that start. So yeah, I hope that kind of addresses, our outlook on building and prioritizing features.
I think so. And I guess, the next question, which is sort of the final question that, I'm sure people are wondering is, what is next for this team? What's next for Responsive? There's obviously a lot more stuff that I think that could be done, right? There's things that we still have on that list of, nice to haves and would like to have as part of the experience. So I'd love to hear from people on the team, sort of what you feel like this unlocks, this foundation that we've launched this past week into wide release. I'll start with you, Nick.
Yeah. Again, it's we like to look at Responsive as, again, it's a feature set, it's a way to build on Bubble, but it's a foundation. It's a foundation for what we can build next. And so I think that is one of the most special things. So one area that we want to explore is, of course, like, continuing to build on top of what we've already built with additional features. There's a lot of great feature requests out there. But then where can we take that next? And so it's all around, like, how users can build beautiful apps. And so there's so many cool areas that we can dive into that, because we've created this foundation built on those core principles. So I want Bobby to talk about what comes next specifically in this area, because a lot of these really cool ideas are coming from him.
Thanks, Nick. One of the things that we're really passionate about here is, like, how do we make designing better, faster, and just simpler through Bubble? This team is really passionate about building the right thing and putting that out for our users and learning that it is the right thing. So what we've been really focusing on is, how do we make Responsive better? How do we start optimizing Responsive and not thinking about this as the new engine? Something that Nick says a lot, it's actually really powerful, is this isn't the new Responsive engine. This is the new way we design a Bubble. This is our core foundation. Now this is our core foundation, we can do a lot of better things too. So how do we make design better and faster for our users? How do we provide less friction? How do we make this no-code tool just feel as efficient as anything that you'd want? So some of the things that we're starting to explore is, how do we make interacting with fonts and colors a little bit more frictionless, make that a little bit more automatic for our users? And how do we start building Bubble to feel a little bit more like a design tool that goes a little bit quicker and also allows anybody to build whatever they want? So how do we start thinking about some of the core principles around, I don't know, like, what if we start thinking about certain stylistic elements? Like, what if we made, like, fonts or colors something a little bit more applicable, and we made changing a font across your application a little bit quicker and more efficient? Or what if we treated color schemes as something you could update and have propagate across your app? We're starting to think about what we could apply to make Bubble a little bit more powerful.
Yeah, and I think that there's definitely basically unlocking sort of like new ideas around, like, the UI, the reusability of Bubble, of different components. And I think, when we were talking earlier today, I remember Cal mentioning something about just the performance and the speed of building. So Cal, if you want to talk a little bit about, like, what the new Responsive has been looking like in terms of that performant quality.
Yeah, definitely. As an engineer, I'm personally pretty excited about the performance aspects, obviously. And really, with our old engine, there were a couple of core liabilities that prevented us from making a lot of optimizations. And so when we set out to kind of rebuild how users build on Bubble, we could design it in such a way that allowed us to scale out our performance efforts and really invest heavily in front-end performance. And so right now, the new Responsive engine is a big performance improvement over the legacy one. It depends on the page you're upgrading, but on some of the pages I had seen upwards of like 40% performance improvement, which is already great out of the box, but it's not even like there's a lot of stuff that this unlocks down the line. And I'm really excited for those new features coming down because we're using the core web technologies now. We're using modern CSS. We're using layouts that people develop. We can really take advantage of a lot of the progress that's been made in the web development space. Like Josh and Manuel, they started this back in 2012. If you look at where web apps now are in 2022, there's a lot of things that we could do on the performance side, and I'm really excited to bring those into Bubble and make Bubble apps super performant in the future. And so, yeah.
Thank you, Cal. And thank you everyone again for tuning in. Appreciate all your questions. I'm actually going to start showcasing some of the user questions that you've been asking. So if you have questions for the team, now's the time. We've got about 15 minutes left. My first question, and this one's an easy one that I can answer for everyone, but it's a question of if you're building on the beta responsive engine, does it automatically move to the new responsive editor today? So the answer is yes, if you are creating a new app. If you are currently working on an existing app, you will basically still have the ability to take your time and upgrade your pages one by one. There is information on our website on the manual about how to upgrade legacy pages. So if you look for that in manual.bubble.io, you will be able to find information on how to port your pages. Basically, you could click upgrade. You will see a little icon at the top that shows what type of responsive you are in. And similarly to the question of what about old designs and templates that are already created, we've actually been working, I think, with our template creators to get them up to speed on the new responsive and have them update their templates to be compatible with the new responsive engine. So looking forward, if you go into our template marketplace, you'll be able to see indications based on the template creators of which ones are compatible with new responsive. And as for the old ones, they're certainly available to work on if you have access to the legacy experience, but we're really encouraging everyone to swap over. And a couple of these questions, I guess I can pass along to the team. Will the new responsive editor, old responsive editor, I guess, be phased out completely? Will older apps ever be switched to responsive automatically? I think that's a question maybe Nick can answer.
Sure. Yeah, I get this question a lot, and it's a very fair question. So definitely wanted to make sure we address it. I guess the short answer is no, right? Like our philosophy here is, as much as we love the new responsive editor, we don't want to disrupt our existing customers, right? You all have built some incredible, like mind-blowing stuff on the legacy engine, and we don't want to disrupt that. Now, we think it's easier or it's more powerful to build on the new engine, but again, want that to be your choice. So we will not kind of force people off the old engine. That will be around as long as you want it to. What we're going to try and do though is make the new responsive editor so awesome that you're going to want to switch and you're going to want to do it quickly. So yeah, we won't take it away, but it will be where we're investing moving forward. So hopefully there are more and more reasons to switch over despite the awesome stuff that you guys have already built.
And here's a question from Luca. More generally speaking, how much of a match is there between HTML, CSS, and the way new features work on Bubble? I think maybe Cal is a good person to answer this in terms of, what I think this is probably a larger question of, when people ask about how Bubble interacts with, traditional web design. So take it away.
Yeah, and yeah, the short answer is there is now a big match between HTML and CSS. I think if you ever opened up the Chrome Inspector and looked at a Bubble page on the legacy engine, you may have been confused with how it was laying out your elements. But if you go on the new responsive engine, everything's pretty standard. Like a group is just a div around elements, and every element is just an individual HTML element. Like it's basically a one-to-one mapping now. And a lot of the properties that you see on the layout tab and the property editor map pretty much one-to-one with the corresponding CSS property. And so really, we just kind of wanted to bring the Bubble editor up to the standards of CSS. And again, what I mentioned earlier is this allows us to use a lot of off-the-shelf technology and means that we don't have to build everything from scratch. We can take advantage of, again, a lot of the developments that have been made in the web design and web development space. And so, yeah, so the short answer is yes. And that also makes it a lot easier to play with custom CSS. And so if you want to use any CSS feature, you can easily style your elements and have it be compatible with the new responsive engine as well.
Cool, thank you so much. When making upgrades and new features, are you coming from the mindset of building with accessibility? I think maybe Bobby, you're a good person to answer this question.
Absolutely. Currently, our product isn't fully focused on accessibility. Like we have, sorry, let me reset that. Currently, it's not coming from the mindset of building with accessibility because we want to do that right. So when we do get to accessibility, we want to make sure that we flesh that out and that we can provide users the path to choose their own adventure, but also understand what they're building and how accessible that actually is. That may come down to actually exposing users like their A contrast ratio, as well as the contrast ratio for their colors, exposing ARIA Alexa labels, as well as a couple of other things. That's something that we would need to imagine from the ground up in some cases. And when we do that, we want to be able to imagine that right. So that is something that is top of mind, but it's not something that we've approached just quite yet.
Cool. And to that, I guess, to general question, I think this is a common thing that people often ask is just visibility onto the features roadmap and voting. I believe there is still an idea board that exists on Bubble. If you go to bubble.io/idea board, where you can put in feature requests and vote on them. And we do actually look at this. Like it is often the case of that. And also, you know, if you tweet at us and talk about features, I guarantee you that someone is looking at them because I know I've looked at them. So I think it's fair to say, and you've all probably had this experience at Bubble, but like feedback here is often very visible to the team. Like people do see the comments that you make and the requests that you're making. And especially because I think as a community, I want to give a shout out to all of you for coming here. I think that I've always said that Bubble users are like the most like sophisticated like customers or users that I've ever seen for a tool. Like you guys really know what you want and you know like sort of what you want your tools to do for you. So that really helps us when you're giving, you know, constructive feedback. And I also just wanted to, you know, give a great shout out to you guys about that. We have about 5 more minutes left. And so I will be passing along a couple of questions to the team. But once again, sort of as a recap, if you haven't yet got around to new responsive, if you are looking into starting to build your first web app, definitely check it out. Bubble.io/responsive-design will show you all the things that you can see with the new responsive. When you create your first app, you will be automatically in it. So it's going to be basically if you're new to this will be your own experience and you can learn. We have tons of resources. You can go on our academy to see videos on how to build in responsive. You can play the game that we just demoed today to sort of get yourself practicing. But yeah, so I think there are a couple of small questions here that I think I can pass along. And thank you everyone for all of your comments. But here's a question of, will there be a design interface similar to other tools in the future? I mean, we do have the design tab, but I'm curious if anybody wants to take a stab at answering the question of like how we're thinking about like the Bubbles design interface in the future.
Yeah, I can actually take this one. One of the things that we're really focusing on right now is adding feature functionality to our product, making it more feature rich. We will be attacking the design interface at some point, but as of right now, we just want to provide more power to our users and enable more people to build better things. So that's our core focus right now. How do we provide feature functionality that allow anybody to build any app that they want and keep on adding to that functionality for any gaps that we have currently? Once we have that fleshed out, we can start prioritizing how we look at our design interface and how all those features will fit within it best and most elegantly.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. And I think that we're almost at time for any other questions. I'm going to throw in one more, which has to do with the question of native responsive features, animation, swipe overs. There's also a question I think I'm seeing about the question of native mobile wrapping. So if you guys have any, like if there's things you want to share about that, feel free to do so. I think it's definitely something that I know we talk about a lot at Bubble.
Yeah, no, this definitely gets a lot of airtime at Bubble, and we know it is one of the top feature requests from our users. I can't guarantee that, oh yeah, we'll build a native editor one day, or we'll have a wrapper for, the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. We are doing active research onto what it means for a Bubble app to be native. So it is an area of active investigation. It's something that, again, our goal here is to allow users to build any web app how they want it. And so native is obviously an important aspect to that. Mobile friendly is an important aspect to that. So yeah, no, I can't give you any concrete details, but it is something we talk about a lot, and it is something that we're actively investigating.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for all your comments. I'm just putting on some of our favorites here. It was, again, I think the last shout out that I want to give both to this team for building the responsive and to the general Bubble team for supporting all of us in terms of how we work. The last shout out would obviously be to, once again, to you as a community. Please continue to keep iterating, giving us feedback, checking out all our new features, creating apps. I think everything you do helps us. Your success is our success. So I really appreciate it. And I'm going to let everyone sign off and say goodbye for this inaugural live stream. Thank you for joining us for the very first one. We, like I said, Emmanuel said, we hope to do this some more. So really appreciate your time.
Cool.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.